Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Cat here once again with another Frontier Signals update, and I'm here to kind of run the gauntlet with you guys, looking at space weather, volcanism, and earthquakes. So I'm slowly getting dialed in here. There's a video I got coming out soon, which will basically be essentially my YouTube origin story, so to speak, with kind of some of the thoughts and rundown on the journey that I've had in the past 10 years, and also some of the reasons why my YouTube channel has taken the turns it has, so on and so forth. But yeah, that'll be a video I'm working on. And so let's just get right into it. So we'll just kind of cover the space weather first here, where things have been quiet once again. We're no longer in that small G1 solar storm anymore. And we've got the station K and A indices on here now, which both have their own little story to it. And I have the descriptions for both of those down here. And then we take a look at this, and you know, since there's not really anything going on, there's not really much to report here. So go on to the live feed section, where again, looking at things are pretty quiet. So there's not really too much to report here. There is that pretty large coronal hole, kind of in the shape of, you know, one of those hammerhead worms. It's kind of what it reminds me of. So, you know, we're still probably going to see some fluctuations in the magnetic field here, just from that, going into the next several days here. But again, nothing too major. So we'll go down here and just make sure the sunspots are looking pretty. And I'll just take a look at the full resolution image here. So basically we're looking for these blue areas and these orangish red areas to be concentrated and kind of close to each other, resulting in some sort of magnetic complexity. So we see with this sunspot group over here on the left, there is a little bit of complexity there, but really not much, and the size of those sunspots is really nothing. So again, there's really not much risk right now, which is good. And going on with that here, even the real-time orbital displays for the charging hazards has been pretty chill. Not too much to report there. And again, even the aurora forecast doesn't have too much to show here, although it is just slightly more exasperated than it normally would be. So with that, I do want to go into the volcanoes here, which again, I'm trying to pay closer attention to what's common and what may not be so common. And while looking at the 15th here, we have a lot of the same activity with Papua New Guinea, Philippines, Indonesia, and Central and South America. But there's a few on here that kind of piqued my interest a little bit that I haven't really recognized as much. So we got Mayan volcano, Mayan, I don't know how you say it. So this is down in the Philippines, and there's been a little bit of activity there. And looking at the eruption timeline here, it looks like the last major eruptive time scale was around 2018. So this one is fairly regular, but we haven't had this really do much in about 8 years, it looks like. So just to kind of keep an eye on that. And then we have Langila or Langia, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but this is down in Papua New Guinea. So again, looking at the chart here, looks like 2009 to 2013 was the last major eruptive cycle that it had. So it's been more than 10 years for that one. And then the last one here, again, just butchering the names here, we got Piton de la Fournaise, at least that's kind of how my brain reads it. So this one is in France, it's actually on an island. And let's see, I actually didn't look at this, but well, I was looking through its actual list on here, and it looks like for the past month or so it's been active. And then before that, it was about a year to a month ago, about a year ago, and then 2 years ago. And then the list just kind of stops. So if we take a look at this little timetable again here, there's quite a long thing here going back to 1900. And yeah, it looks like this one's fairly active as well throughout time. So nothing too out of the ordinary, but I did just want to take a closer look at these just in case. So there's actual lava fountaining or lava streams coming out of here. And there was a couple of videos associated with it here, so just make sure this is muted because it had some sort of potentially copyrighted music. So as you can see, those lava streams there going fairly far. I'm not exactly sure how big this island is. I did not mean to go directly to X. So that's looking like about what we got going on for that. And now for the final piece here, I wanted to again look at the tremor map, and I did a little bit of questioning, I guess, with AI for what it's worth, right? Because there's something that I swear I noticed when I first started looking at this a few years ago, back when I was like kind of first started watching Dutch Sense. That was actually more than a few years ago. But I swear I remember looking at these tremor lists where the vast majority of them would be less than 1.0 in magnitude energy. And in the recent months that I've been looking at this again mostly, I've pretty much noticed that there's like maybe about a 1-to-1 ratio between tremors below 1 magnitude, which are like micro events, and tremors within 1 to 2 magnitude range, which gets to the, once it gets into like the 3 range, then they're not really tremors anymore. So really just looking to the 0 to 2 spectrum here. And so I just wanted to, again, for what it's worth, ask Google's AI if there's any sort of correlation here. So at first it didn't really know what I was talking about. It does, again, correlate eventually to larger activity, depending on what the slow slip events are looking like and what kind of area it is. But what I was specifically wondering was just the statistical correlation between tremors below 1 compared to 1 to 2. And so basically what it says is, well, for every 1 unit decrease in magnitude, there's approximately 10 times more events. So basically, let's see, there was, statistically, you will see roughly 3 to 4 microtremors, less than 1.0, for every 1 tremor in the 1 to 2 range. And that's pretty much lines up exactly with what my vague memory recalls when looking at this years ago compared to looking at it this year. Is that, and see, okay, this is really unhelpful. There's like this little magnitude list sorter, but as you can see, it does not work. So it does not sort or filter the magnitude correctly. So we're just looking at things at random here. But at any given part of the list here, for the most part, you see much closer to a 1-to-1 ratio for tremors below 1 magnitude and tremors above 1 magnitude. So we can just kind of ponder down the whole list here. It seems like the tremors have gotten a lot more consistent as well. When we take a look at this graph up here, kind of zoom in on it a little bit, and the number of tremors hasn't exactly increased over time, but we see this whole block here looks a lot more filled in, so it's a lot more consistent, and there's less spikes, and now it's more or less just constantly ongoing. And again, if we're seeing a general uptick in the magnitude of the events themselves, then that is going to be another thing to pay attention here. So even like this part of the list, pretty much everything on here is above a 1. Drag it down a little more, everything's a 1 or higher. Keep dragging it down, again, same thing. So just something I noticed, just something I thought I'd point out. And with that, that is pretty much what I see going on there. So rolling that into the EQ3D program, we're going on the other side of the spectrum, where I am looking at activity in the mid 5 range going into the 6 range. And this is looking at the entire past week. So starting with that deep 6.2, and I mean this was deep, it was 510 kilometers, which is pretty deep, but you know, not too uncommon for this region. Again, it happens. And so that results in shallower and larger earthquakes, as we see here with this 6.4, but looking at the data, it's probably closer to a upper range 6. And then we had 6.0 activity over here in South America, down in Chile. And then now we actually got a fresh 6 up here between Japan and Kamchatka. So we're looking at similar sized earthquakes over a vast area. And again, even with these mid-range 5s, that's exactly what we see there as well. We see similar sized activity in a similar time range spread out over a vast area. And so that is precisely the seismic wave traveling across the entire plate and potentially the entire planet, dropping off all these similar sized earthquakes from one single source. So it's not that necessarily one earthquake is causing the other. There's actually a whole another mechanism that is happening that is causing all of them. And that drastically helps reduce the randomization of where these will strike. So I'm not quite good enough to precisely forecast these yet, but as I pay close attention here, you can easily see the patterns forming by just looking at this stuff for even about a few weeks to a month. You can really start to see patterns emerging and eventually guess those patterns, basically. So based on what we see here, we got a 6 down here, we got a 6 up here. I believe we can definitely see something similar range activity happen in the middle point. So, you know, following the tectonic plate boundaries, we're not looking exactly in the middle here. We have to also put into factor the plates themselves, which basically follows along these directional arrows. And so with that being said, this energy is going to carry on to the Pacific Northwest, but also we're going to have this kind of bounce back and meet into the middle point, which basically means the Philippines, or it could strike potentially over here where this other 5 is. So we're basically looking inside of this entire triangulation period or area here for another similar sized 6 to occur. And, you know, it's probably going to be over here on the Philippines, or again over here in the middle of the Pacific. And then as that energy transfers over to the Pacific Northwest, then we could potentially see some new activity over here as well. So we've still had all these tremors and low-level activity down south. But, you know, Canada's looking awfully quiet. So when I drag it out further, I'm not exactly sure how old these are, because again, the Canada feed is based off of 30 days, and everything else is based off of a 7-day feed. So I'm not exactly sure how old these are supposed to be. But I do notice when you take the scroller, when you take it all the way out, you get a ton of stuff because this is all from the last 30 days as opposed to the last 7 days. Just one other thing I wish was a little bit different, but you know, we can only have so many nice things. So again, just looking at the Canada feed that's in combination with these other two, you know, it's a little harder to tell when and what is happening over here, especially when you look up an earthquake and it doesn't bring up the specific event. It just takes you here and is like, hey, figure it out. And the other thing I absolutely despise, you know, I guess I understand it from a global scientific point of view, but when they use universal time for everything, it kind of, I don't like it. But that's because I haven't really ever had to worry about time zones in the past, and now that I'm getting into all these data feeds, you know, now I got to try to convert universal time into real time wherever I am, and yeah, it's just an extra step. So anyways, that is what we got, pretty much running the whole gauntlet. Like I said, I've got some future plans here with a future video involving kind of my YouTube origin story, as well as when it comes to the Frontier Signals website. As it gets closer to becoming a website, I think I'm going to cover less updates on what I'm doing. I think I want some of the content that I put in here to be a little bit of a surprise, so that when I do release it, there's a whole lot of new goodies to look out for. So anyways, with that, I hope you all enjoyed this one, and I will catch you all in the next.